India's story is long and fascinating, span thousands of years and make the rise and fall of empires and the development of important religions today. So I'm going to talk briefly about the story of India. The first people of India appears more or less 73,000 years before Christ, but its first civilization, the Indus Valleys, appeared between 2500 and 1900 before Christ. Now I'm going a little further in the time. We have the India empires that emerged after the clean of the Indus Valley, but one empire stood out. The Mauryan Empire, led by Ashoka, is one of the most famous make and period of expansion territory, unification of the territory, and adoption of Buddhism. Now, moving towards British colonization in the 18th century, the British West Indian Company gradually gained political and economic power in India, which had a profound impact of India's society by introducing administrative, educational, and legal India is under British control from 1858 to 1947. In 1947, India gained independence led by Mahatma Gandhi, and independence movement non-violence led to India becoming an independent republic in 1947. Since India was grown in a major democracy and global economic power. Some observations: India is the birthplace of important religions such as Hinduism and Buddhism. India had external influence from invaders and traders foreigners of times such as Greeks, Persians, Huns, and Mullins brought new ideas and practices that become integral in Indian culture.
By the way, talking about religion, Hinduism and Buddhism are still the main event in the country.
I'll start on Hinduism. Hinduism is the most followed creed in India and one of the main at the world. The creed started development between 2000 years and 1500 years before Christ on Indian subcontinent region. When Vedas, the main scripture of Hinduism, killed Vedic culture, that text keep being the oldest scriptures in the world that still would follow us. India has also Buddhism as a relevant religion. Buddhism is based on Siddhartha Gautama's teaching, the Buddha. Siddhartha's doctrine has emphasis in search for enlightenment and human pain relief. Buddha, the Buddhism founder, get enlightenment on the Bodhi tree. The Siddhartha's teaching comes from 6th century before Christ and has some like 500 million goals at the world.
Now, when it comes to culture, as a consequence of a history of miscegenation and occupancy by the most different folks in its territory, India is way ahead of the topic's plurality. Did you know that there are, for example, 22 official languages in the country? Yes, 22. Most of the Indians are at least bilingual. Once the official government communication medium, Hindu, isn't the most used by the population in the major part of the country, where more local variations, such as Punjabi and Guarajabi, are way ahead in the popular mouth-to-mouth. Another example of this rich culture comes in the gastronomy. Recognized by its strong and original taste, Indian food, beyond the native roots, has influence of a lot of other cultures, mainly because of the Britain and the Portuguese colonizers. Great example of it is a national version of the typical English dish, and not a good thing in English gastronomy, by the way, the fish and chips. Talking about the way of living, it's a little funny to think that although there's such a rich gastronomy and memorable dishes, as the popular samosas and the fish curry, not only most of the Indians don't eat cow meat, which is considered a sacred animal, but more than that, there's a good part of the population that's absolutely vegan, once meat was to be considered an import food. The architecture, just as the same way as gastronomy, has to be highlighted as an example of the miscegenation and the diversity of the country. There are lots of temples that contemplate several of the various existing religions and sometimes even both of them, as the famous Taj Mahal, influenced by Muslims and Hindus. Moreover, there still exist historic districts that preserve the Britannic way of building. These are pretty clear examples of how religion occupies a very central role in India's society, but the strongest aspect in this way, no doubt, is the caste system.
India works in a social hierarchy, commonly known as being divided into four castes, which will dictate a person's profession, social life, and their merit since birth. It is a system that has been deeply rooted in the Hinduism belief in karma and reincarnation for about 3,000 years. The Brahmins are the highest and most esteemed caste of the hierarchy, usually being depicted as the priestly class. The Kshatriyas are the second caste. The people from it often known traditionally as warriors and rulers. The Vaishyas are the third caste, its people consisting of artisans, merchants, and tradesmen. The Shudras are the fourth and lowest caste, consisting of manual workers. There is also a part of the population that is called Dalits, or untouchables. They were considered so impure in the society that they weren't allowed to use the same water or walk the same streets as people from higher castes, which led to the creation of groups to stop the social decriminalization.
But when it comes to society, another aspect that comes up is chauvinism. India is the third country where it happens the most, starting in childhood and occupying a very important and sad role for most part of women all over their lives. As a consequence, it is pretty common to realize that while when a man borns, there's a huge celebration with a lot of colors, music and dance, when a woman borns, the family tries to hide it. And talking about family, India has a very peculiar structure. Most part of families are big and organize themselves all over the same roof. This means that, on the contrary of we are accustomed here, for example, Indian children live together with their parents, grandparents, uncle, cousin, etc., all at once and in the same house. Inside the families, the structure keeps almost the same that in society in a kind of hierarchy. While the eldest man of each one is elected as the representative of the family, the eldest woman is responsible for distributing the housework to other women. Moreover, men are usually considered stronger and better to enter the job market, and that's why most of them become the family's economic provider, while women are usually associated with housework only. By the way, India's economy is another aspect that needs to be highlighted.
India is increasingly growing economically and gaining prominence in the economic world. The country began to get rich mainly after the large entry of multinationals, which saw an advantage in cheap labor and great demand. Over time, the workforce became more qualified, but this didn't prevent the stupid exploitation of workers, who were subject to terrible conditions. The number of people in poverty is more or less 13%, which for India is a large number of people. This means that more than 400 million Indians have lived themselves out of the poverty line in 15 years. Currently, India has the worst per capita income in the BRICS, which means that the average income per person is low, with a salary of $1,500, reflecting the country's poor income distribution, as the top 10% of people-rich population holds around 73% of national income. The country is very prominent in two main sectors, the technology sector and agriculture. India is known worldwide for its technology sector, which contributes around 8% of GDP. Regarding the agricultural sector, it's still the area that provides the most jobs. Since 70% of Indians live in rural areas, this sector is still the one that employs the most people, as the country is not yet very industrialized. Therefore, subsistence agriculture, which focuses on the survival of the farmer and his family, is still extremely used and guarantees the survival of a good part of the population, occupying 16% of GDP. It's worth highlighting the participation of the Indian film industry, which generates a lot of revenue due to the country's culture. Overall, India's service sector accounts for 52% of the country's GDP, providing employment to 23% of the workforce.
Finishing also at all, although India still has a lot of challenges to overcome and there are tries to make it real, it is an extremely rich country, so much in culture, religion, gastronomy, history, and even economy, the fifth greatest GDP in the world. And, no doubt, just in the way another tens of countries did, it is going to beat its limitations.